Habarigani, my Induga na Dada. This is your brother, your elder, General Abu Amin Ra. Listen, my brothers and sisters. I've done a lot of reading, writing, research, listening, dialoguing on the subject at hand for most of my life. So I feel at some point it's necessary for me, after listening to all of your stories, to critically analyze them and then bring you the results of it, which is my story. So let me share my story with you today, my brothers and sisters. Listen, I was born in a place called Montgomery, Alabama, the Cotton State, the cradle of the Confederacy. Are you listening to me? I've always had a disdain for white people, because anytime I interacted with them, they showed disdain for me, and I always reflected it back to them. But one of the major catalysts in my life that changed me and started me on the road to becoming who I am today occurred when I was 16 years old in Montgomery, Alabama, without a job during the summertime. Listen, most black boys during my time earned maybe $1 or $2 a day by going to a place called Maxwell Air Force Base off of Bell Street to their golf course and would rip their bodies out for 18 holes for 90 cents, carrying a big bag of steel golf clubs. So one day after I'd gone out and received my 90 cents for caddying for 18 holes, plus 10 cents tip, which made it $1 even, I took off to make my journey back home because it was around 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening, and it would get dark rather soon. So I had to cross some railroad tracks at the Bell Street Bridge there. It was called the Atlantic Coastline Station. My father worked there. He was a mechanic's helper, I think it was, something like that was his title. And as I approached the track to cross the tracks to come save maybe a half mile's journey, I noticed 2 white men waiting on the other side, looking my way. Then I immediately knew something was up, something I'd better get prepared for if I wanted to guarantee to leave this place alive. So when I arrived on the other side of the tracks, one of them was wearing a blue coverall suit with a cap that matched it. I assumed he was the engineer of the train. The other man had on a regular civilian suit with a hat on his head, cocked ace deuce to the right. He reminded me of Dick Tracy, a cartoon character I had read when I was a child. But they said the one with the civilian clothes, "What you doing coming across these tracks, boy?" So I just put on my best European imitating voice, and I answered, "Oh, I'm just coming home, sir, from caddying, and I'm trying to get home before dark." And he answered me, he said, "Okay, we don't mind you coming across these tracks, boy, but you might get hit by a train. And we don't want that to happen to you. We should or we wouldn't. Turn around and ask Mr. So-and-so." pointing towards the engineer then, one with the coveralls on, and asked him if we mind you coming across here. And at that time, they maneuvered me between them. I had one on my left and one on my right, so I just turned around and asked him. So I knew something was up, I just felt it, black boy, two white men. I knew something bad was about to happen. So I reluctantly began to turn the other way, and I began to feel the vibrations of his right hand pulling out what we call a sap, blackjack, or whatever you want to call it, loaded with buckshots, piece of leather. Had a big pouch that carried buckshots in it. So he was swinging it towards, with his right hand there. And automatically, for some reason, I threw my right arm up. It caught him at the wrist, stopped the blow, and the blackjack fell to the ground. Now, what did I want to do that for? He pulled out his pistol. He hit me upside the head, knocked a hole in my head, and blood started gushing out. Then he said, "Run, nigga, run." And I began to run. And I heard a shot, pow. Didn't hurt nowhere, so I kept running. I don't know whether he was shooting at me or trying to scare me. There was one shot fired. And after running and walking through the bushes on the low end of Oak Street there, before you get to Bell Street, there was bushes there. A puddle of water was inside the bushes, so I reached down and got mud and packed it on my head and stopped the blood flow. But I was filled with so much anger, I could hardly control it. But I had to control it because I wouldn't want my father to know, because my father was one of those black men who was very protective of his family. And if I told him, he would have gotten a shotgun, gone down to the shop, perhaps killed the man, but in the end, he would have been devastated. So I had to keep the secret from him. So I made a pact with myself. I said, "You turn 17 the first of the year. You need to join the Air Force. Get you one of those 45 automatics. Come back here on leave after basic training. Come down here in the evening, pop this man, go home, and go back to your Air Force base. This is what I dreamed to do." So I went home, no blood flowing, anything like that, packed it all up in mud and stuff, avoided my mother as much as I could, But then, I told her I was going into the Air Force the first of the year, but I needed her signature. Because if you're only 17 years old, your mother had to sign you in to join the Air Force. So she said, "No, I'm not going to do that. You're not going to no white folks' army and join no army." I said, "Well, if you don't, I get somebody to pretend they're you and do it for me." So she got kind of angry with me. She said, "Would you do that?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I'd have them put in jail." And so after a little talking and discussion, she decided, okay. Since she saw I was set on it, she says, "First of the year, I'll go down there with you and sign you." And she did it. I ended up in the Air Force, in the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas for a little while, maybe a year or something, I forgot now. Had troubles down there, and I'll tell you about a story about that later, me and the little platoon leader, squad leader, what they want to call him. I'll tell you about that later, that's another story. But I stayed there and did my period there and everything, and then they shipped me out immediately to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado, to a tech school to, match my intelligence scores up with the kind of job they can put me in position. So I decided I should go to electronics to learn how to work with radar and electronics. think this year. I didn't understand it, but anyway, I went, finished that school. So after about a year, I was ready to come back home. Finished tech school. And the strange thing about it, I bought the 45 caliber automatic with me to get it. I got there for a day or two, and then I asked my father, how's everything going down on the railroad there? Everybody thinks they're the same. I said, yeah. I said, same old engineer there? He said, yeah, he's still there. I said, what about that old detective? He said, man, that man caught something and died. Let me tell you something. I've never been so frustrated in my life, I learned that the frustration has two sides to it. There's a side where you're confused and don't want to reject everything that's been presented to you, but then on the other side, you understand that was the best option for you, and you'll understand it someday. So even though I was sad, mad, because my vengeance, my justice had been taken from me. But then I began to think and say, listen, you keep living your life, improving your life, so you can be the agent of change in your interaction with your oppressors and their descendants. You always draw the line in the sand to where they can go and they cannot cross. Because if they cross the line, they're disrespecting you and disregarding you. And it's wartime. It's time for the strongest to prevail and the weak to fall aside, because there must be a struggle. And when you win, redraw the struggle again, make it heavier. And tell everybody, this is my private domain right here. Don't cross the path. You understand what I'm saying? We must become determined people. We must want what we want and struggle for what we want, not for what someone suggests to us or think we should have. You understand what I'm saying? In America, for us, it should be freedom or death. Those are the choices we have. Either we're going to be free or we're going to die trying to be free. Because if we don't say anything, don't stand up and take a stand, the situation remains the same. So my brothers and sisters, we have to develop the attitude, the understanding that it's better to be a dead, struggling fighter for black liberation than it is to be a slave kissing the master behind to maintain his or her survival. So my brothers and sisters, we're going to pray courage to place in life today, but we must always draw the line in the sand. We must determine who we are, what we want, and how we're going to get it. If once we've decided, was moved to concretize it. I just want to share that with you because that was a turning point in my life. I've never looked back since. I moved to the point now from black nationalism to Muslim, Ram. Now I'm in a different place, which is called Pan-Africanism. I believe that until every African is free everywhere he is, then Africans nowhere will be free. That the struggle now is for global African liberation. Peace. And Hotep to you, my Nduga and my Dada. Hotep.